The second thing that bothers me is the UFO story. And, the more you dig into that and talk to people with actual knowledge of it, again, that's another story where there are some, fanciful ideas floating around that are just, there's no evidence that they're true. But if you talk to people who, have actual knowledge of it that they gathered themselves, there are parts of that story that I do not understand at all that are really, really, really dark. It's so dark that I, haven't told my wife about it. I mean, I haven't verified any of this, but this is not just stuff that I read on the internet. I know you all are very, very grounded in that story, so I think I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But there's some stuff there that's just like, man, I'm not even sure what that means. There's a spiritual component there that I don't fully understand. So yes, that story bothers me. And I think, last thing I'll say, that one of the reasons that we've had all these disclosures and all of these, 10 whistleblowers at this point, and it hasn't really become front page news. Part of it's suppression. Parts of the government don't want you to know about it, but part of it is the public can't deal with it. It's too far out. The implications are too profound. And so, and I understand that. Because I've heard things where I'm just like, oh man, I don't even really want to know that, honestly.
Deeply disturbing stuff. Forget like saucers and technology. It's deeply disturbing stuff that I haven't even told Natalie. Yep. I agree with you. It's so disturbing. Exactly. I can't even tell my kids. My kids ask me different stories about it, and I won't say it because it's so dark. It's so dark.
I totally agree.
Miles is watching. So.
Okay, Miles, if you're watching the show, Daddy's not going to tell you about that part of the UFO stuff and what's going on with the government.
Okay, can I say one thing? They've known clearly, this is, I think, established, and I feel comfortable saying this as fact. The U.S. government, these are real, whatever they are. They're not human. And the government has known that for a long time, possibly going back to the 1930s at least. And, of course, there's tons of evidence in the written record, in the physical record, in paintings, and in literature, that people have been seeing and interacting with these things for a long time. So we know that. But the justification one often hears is, well, the government, various presidents who have been read in, not all have been, haven't wanted to disclose this because it would scare people. And I've always thought that's bullshit. You're hiding a crime, which they are, by the way, in my opinion. But I do think there's a sense in which that's not totally crazy. Like, there is some stuff, if it's true, and I'm kind of thinking it may be true, that's so radical that, well, as we both said, we don't want to tell the people we love most about it because, why would you, disturb someone like that? So I kind of get that. I hate to admit it. I'm not arguing for hiding things. I believe in the truth and I believe in disclosure, but I understand the impulse. Like, holy smokes, this is heavy. You know what I mean?
And the government's involvement in it makes it even heavier because then you realize the complicity.
Exactly.
Of it. Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about the same thing. I can tell. Okay. Excuse me.
Should I go?
No. This is what we used to talk about in commercial breaks all the time. This is the kind of stuff. But anyway.
So at the time, I never would have believed any of that. But now I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So what was Tucker Carlson talking about in that exchange? And I have a general idea. And let's talk about the dark spiritual reality of UFOs and our government's complicity in it. So let's start off with cattle mutilations. This gives us a hint of what's going on. And this is a real phenomenon of animals being dismembered and cauterized, and sometimes the blood being removed from these animals. Very bizarre mutilations with high-tech and surgical precision. So that gives you an idea. Think about that. This is obviously it's related to the UFO phenomenon of these, whatever you want to call it, these entities, we'll call them entities, going and finding livestock and torturing these creatures to death. Why would they do something like that? So I was talking to somebody who's into UFOs, and they're talking about these entities receiving nourishment, gratification, feasting on suffering and pain. So that's a part of what these entities are doing, is they're getting gratification from pain, agony, suffering. They're nourished by it. It's pretty sick and disturbing, isn't it? And I want to tell you a personal experience I had with one of these entities. So this is really bizarre stuff, and I'm kind of surprised it's going on. I earned my doctorate, and I've been a very skeptical person. I studied history. I'm a historian, and I look at the pyramids. We know the process of building pyramids, the step pyramid. They developed these techniques. It took time. If you go to Saqqara, you have the bent pyramid, you have a collapsed pyramid. This is something of human achievement. It's hard for me to believe all these things, but when something seems to be credible, you have to open your mind to the truth and go where the truth leads. But I want to talk about one of my experiences. Well, what I'm saying is, it happens. These pilots are coming across these crafts. They're able to some of our higher tech equipment picks them up. Sometimes they're able to defy the laws of physics, and apparently they can vanish. They're there, or even render themselves invisible. So one night, well, I got to talk about a little background. This is, I guess, in the '90s. We're staying in Plum Grove Road in Cleveland, and what had happened is my Aunt Velma. She was eccentric. I love my aunt, but my mother left my father, and she's just very talkative. It's kind of funny. She writes you a letter, and it'll be chicken scratch. You couldn't read her name. It's kind of funny. Several pages of paper with just scribbling on it, and you can't make heads or tails. So she's an eccentric woman. I love my aunt, and but it was a bad split between my parents, and I knew that she's took the side against my father. I didn't want to hear her running down my dad, so I hadn't talked to her for a while, and then suddenly she died, and so I felt a lot of remorse, grief, but also guilt and regret, because it's like, I could have called her up, and time went by. Maybe I should have just listened to her rant and rave about my dad. Not necessarily have to agree with her. It's just you have to maintain relationships, be patient with people, especially with her eccentricities. So I felt really bad about that. And so one night I had this dream. It's very interesting. I was in a neighborhood walking on, like where I grew up in town, Western Sugarland. And I was with my sister, my little sister. We're just walking around the sidewalk in the neighborhood, watching, neighborhood activities, children playing, dogs barking, stuff like that. So I'm walking down, and I see a woman, an elderly woman. She's like motioning at me. So I look at her, and she captures my attention. So I look at this woman, and then it's like she's not motioning at me. She's angry at me. She's got a fist, and she's, I can't hear what she's saying, but she's yelling at me. And then I notice then I recognize it's my Aunt Velma. So all of these emotions flood over me: shame, guilt, sorrow, grief, and then this dream is very vivid. So I feel like sometimes you're dreaming, you're dreaming, and sometimes you have these lucid dreams where it's so vivid. I think it's you wake up and realize it's a dream. But at the time I thought that this was real life. That I was really walking on the neighborhood with my sister. So then I see the ghost. So I have I realize I see Aunt Velma first. I see her, I recognize her, and then suddenly I realize that she's dead, and this is a ghost. Like I said, this experience, the dream is so realistic. I think it's really happening. So I see the ghost. I'm scared. Aunt Elizabeth is dead. This is a ghost, and I'm startled. And I wake up, and then there's this entity in the room with me. And I described it to my brother, and it's like, it looks like a dead spider, or with have their legs curl around and it's like a brain in the center. And I was talking to my brother about this. It says it's like one of the forms that the alien in the movie The Thing with Kurt Russell took. And I said, yes, I like when that body's in the they're doing surgery, and you see these tentacles and spider legs come out. Yeah, that's what it kind of looked like, one of these transitional appearances, this monstrous appearance of the alien and The Thing. The movie was 83, 84. I'm not sure when that movie came out. It's kind of gory, very thought-provoking. It's a good film. So anyway, I see this entity, and I begin praying and calling upon the name of Jesus Christ. And what it does, it just hovers and it phases through the ceiling, and I realized what happened. So what happened is this creature was floating around the neighborhood, and I guess it was checking out people. And so it hovered over me, and it's kind of like doing a mind meld thing. And it was pulling up certain painful memories. Oh, wow, this is kind of fresh. His aunt died, and he feels ashamed he didn't talk to her in a long time. Never got to talk to her again. Feels guilty about that. Oh, and this the sorrow, grief, and it's like a tick. This thing was like a tick, or like a mosquito maybe, and it was feeding off. It brought that dream out, and it was this creature was feeding off of the negative emotions of guilt and grief, and sorrow, and then fear. And the shock of seeing this ghost. Um, so then calling upon the name of Jesus Christ and waking up, it just hovered around. I realized that I just realized this is what was going on. This is a demonic type entity that was going around feeding off of or feasting off of this, is eliciting those emotions because it's getting gratification. Is feeding off of those negative emotions. It's getting sustenance or nourishment from it. And apparently that's what some of these UFOs are. And this is another thing that, I look at the Book of Enoch as classic of, ancient literature, and it's significant. It's historically and culturally significant. But I actually have trouble believing, even though you see the same myth in like the story of Osiris, right? What happens in the story of Osiris? Osiris and Nephthys, he brings his brother Seth, who's powerful and evil in a sense. So you have Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. They come down to civilize. They look at mankind's in a barbaric state, and they civilize. They civilize humanity. And then what happens is a power struggle, and Osiris is murdered by Seth, and he has a son through Isis who avenges his father's death and establishes justice. But you have this idea of these entities coming down and civilizing mankind. But then one of these entities has more sinister motives. And what's the Book of Enoch about? Well, humanity's in kind of a barbaric state, and these watchers are an order of angels. Some of these angels leave the order, the holy watchers. They become unholy. They leave the order and they come down. A number of the watchers fall, and they take human women as wives, and they bear these so-called giants, the Nephilim. And what happens? They civilize these various angels, so-called supposedly civilize mankind. And then the Nephilim begin to they oppress and kill, and they're evil. The Nephilim especially. Which is a hybrid creation. And the Book of Enoch and rabbinic tradition, or some rabbinic traditions, state that demons are actually the disembodied spirits or souls or essences of these human angelic hybrids, these abominations. That's what, and the Hart translation, this Eastern Orthodox person that translated the New Testament, he speaks of demonology in the New Testament. He's arguing that the demons that Jesus is exorcising, according to his interpretation, are the spirit of the Nephilim. And he believes that Jesus is referring to the Book of Enoch, and that Paul is as well. I don't know about that. I mean, like I recognize the importance of the Book of Enoch, but is it literally true? Did this really happen? Maybe. And maybe it is still happening. Maybe we do have the fallen watchers and demons and the Nephilim active. And when I hear about these UFOs, my original, assumption would be these are, well, first off, it's hard to believe that such a thing is true as a skeptic. But if it is true, you'd assume that these are just advanced alien species from another planet. And I'm not saying that that's what I still believe is most likely, but there seems to be, at least in some of these, the phenomenon where you have demonic entities. And apparently some of these are, maybe that's what I came across, one of these entities. Maybe the experience I have had, because that was the whole thing with the dream, waking up and seeing this creature. Watching it, hover off and leave. That was very, very real. The whole thing was as real as any experience I've had in my life. I mean, like that's something that really happened. You know, you got to wonder about that. It's like, but yeah, that was something that really happened to me, just as real as any encounter I had with any other human being. It was very real. This is something that I experienced as real experience, and I understand people being skeptical about it, but that's just one of the experiences I had in life is encountering this demonic entity in that way. Of course, like the Bible says, resist the devil and call upon the name of the Lord, and he will flee, which I did. So if the government has had involvement with these entities, which seems likely, and they know what they are, this reminded me of the case. I remember I was talking to a woman I know in Humble, and she's from Dayton, is in my area. And in 1980, in the end of 1980, you had the Cash Landum UFO incident where this woman's driving down this road close to Houston, Bush Intercontinental Airport, which is Houston Intercontinental Airport before. And she sees this she just assumed it's a low-flying aircraft, but it turns out it's like it's described as big as a water tower, and it's shaped like a diamond. It's shooting flames out of it. So her son, and her friend stopped the road, and they saw this. There's Chinooks, military Chinooks flying around. Of course, then the military denied there's any military vehicles at all. But they scraped out that road where this incident happened, and repaved it in like a day, according to someone who was around that area when that happened. And I have another friend who remembered military helicopters flying all over the place that night. So, and this woman also went to the hospital. She went to the court about this thing. So I think this is a actual event. The funny thing, you look at Wikipedia, it's like, oh, no, this didn't really happen. Of course, Wikipedia is a fake encyclopedia, just like you have fake news, you have fake information from Wikipedia, which is unfortunately controlled by left-wing organizations and by the CIA. So it's a big disinformation site. I mean, it's convenient to find information on Wikipedia. But you have to realize there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation, just false information on Wikipedia's leading source of disinformation in the world, probably. But you think about this. So why I brought that up is this is an actual, like my father saw a UFO when he was a child. He's not somebody who believed in UFOs. He wasn't inclined to believe in things. He's a hellfire and brimstone type preacher. Sort of. He didn't preach. He preached hellfire and brimstone sometimes. Just a Bible believing, Bible thumping, man of God, literally believing and preaching the word of God. And yet he had an experience as a child with UFOs. He's a fundamentalist preacher, so he's not inclined to invent a story like that. That's something he actually saw as a child. I did a video where he described that incident. So with the Cash Landum incident, this woman suffered. She had like severe burns, and the government let her suffer, didn't recompense her in any way. And that's not right. So the government was involved in this incident in Dayton, and they allowed this woman. So if they allow this woman to suffer agony and pain from this exposure to one of these entities and one of these devices, a UFO, they shouldn't have done that. They should have, you got to take. She's an American citizen. They let that happen to her. So it seems likely that the government is allowing people to be abducted and tortured and killed, feeding our citizens to these types of vampiristic entities. So that's the big story that Tucker doesn't want to put out there, but it seems to be true. And you hear these stories, like I said, I'm a historian. I just want to just the facts, but just like the Jeffrey Epstein thing, and it seems so far-fetched, but you had the plane Lolita Express going to Orgy Island. You can see the photographs of this, the idol, the sex temple, and this is too far out for me to believe, but there's like a cliff, and some people say that they're doing human sacrifices, and these people are getting a high. They torture these girls to death, and the body produces, I guess, opioids and just different chemicals through fear and agony, and these dignitaries and celebrities and the movers and shakers are consuming the blood from these victims to get a type of a high from it. Well, when I was in college, we had this class on what was it called? Sociology, but it was about deviant behavior. And we watched this movie about this guy. He was into, what was it? There's in the A Man Called Horse thing. They put the hooks to their chest and hang from a tree to commune with the gods because your body produces a natural opioids and you have this mystical experience. It's just very bizarre and disturbing. But that's something that the Apache Sundance, I think that's what it's called. So if that's a real thing, that seems far out and freaky. I really find it hard to believe that that's going on, that they're actually sacrificing people at Orgy Island. We know they're molesting children there, and the girls being sexually trafficked, but who knows? So anyway, I mean, if people are doing that, maybe these entities, these demonic entities are actually. We need to consider the possibility that if the Book of Enoch is talking about something that really happened, is talking about something, and the story of Osiris is talking about something that happened in the earliest stages of human civilization. And if these entities have been around for a while, I mean, look at the Nazca lines. That's another thing about disinformation. You can only see them. You can see parts from the ground or from hills. You can't make out all of the Nazca lines except through the air, from above, from an aircraft. That's the only way to see it. And we're still discovering some, so obviously you can't see them all from the ground. But Wikipedia and other sources lie about that. But think about it. We have the Nazca lines showing there's the visitation of these crafts and these entities. But look at the Aztecs, for example, and we see this in other ancient civilizations. What did these entities want? How did they want to be appeased? They wanted, the Mayans and the Aztecs. They wanted blood sacrifice. So perhaps these entities were masquerading as ancient gods, or these Mesoamerican gods who want to feast on, because the horrible atrocities that the Aztecs did, taking young men and women, and you just watch the Mel Gibson movie Apocalypto, but it was much worse than that. You're talking about skinning them alive and bringing about maximum torture of innocent victims. Maybe that this was done to feed, to provide nourishment, and these evil entities feast off of the human suffering, as this entity which attacked me did. So that's something to think about. And this conflict that we see in the Bible, this great spiritual conflict, looks like it's real, and it's been going on for a long time. So apparently that's what Tucker Carlson's talking about. And I think it'd be better if you had this information, because people aren't going to believe it anyway. So you might as well just put all the information out there and say, hey, this is what people say is going on. But like I said, I had an experience with one of these entities. I mean, it actually was pulling out, I guess trauma and pain I was going through, and eliciting some kind of a dream to prompt these emotions. It was feeding off of them. So I think, if I've had that experience, maybe it's part of a larger thing that's going on. And the other thing my brother's talking about is that these entities seem to be trans-dimensional, like they're, I guess, the spiritual realm. And that's the biggest thing that bothers me with the Book of Enoch. It's like, how can and that's what Augustine, I don't like Augustine, because Calvinism comes out of Augustine. I think Calvinism's I'm not a Calvinist. But Augustine's like, how can a spiritual being reproduce with a human being? It's impossible. I mean, spiritual beings are non-tangible, right? They're not made of matter. They're the spirit. But maybe Augustine's wrong about that. Maybe we don't understand the nature of the angelic spiritual. We have our assumptions and belief, but maybe the reality is more complicated than that. Maybe our theology isn't. It seems rational, but maybe the reality is a little bit more deeper and complicated than that. Maybe there is a way for these entities to somehow manifest and take on physical form and matter. And apparently that's something that's going on. That's what Tucker's talking about, the spiritual thing, where these things are emerging from a spiritual world and taking on physical form. And of course, this is what the Book of Enoch said happened. It's like there's a very sinister force of evil going on. I'm not saying all UFOs are the same thing. There's probably different types of phenomena, but it does seem to be that this is what Tucker's talking about. And like I said, I had an experience with it myself. So there is a spiritual dimension where these things are emerging from a spiritual world, but there's also this dark dimension where these things are demonic and they're feeding off of human and animal pain and agony. They get satisfaction, nourishment from it somehow. They feed off of it. Like I said, like this thing's like a mosquito going around. Like a mosquito, I guess they find where your blood is and they suck your blood out. So these entities, I guess they torture and kill people or make them suffer. It's just like that entity which attacked me did, to feed off of these negative and painful emotions. So we're looking at a force of evil. But as it says in the Lord of the Rings, there's that quotation that we shouldn't think that evil is the only force out there. In the end, I guess this proves that the spiritual world isn't a figment of our imagination. It's real. There are angels, there's demons, there's a God in heaven, and there's a great spiritual conflict between good and evil. And we can have victory, as I did in this case when this entity attacked me. I claim victory through the power of Jesus Christ. So I'll leave it there. We could talk about and discuss this issue more in the future, but I wish that he'd stop being so vague and unclear, and just put the information out there and let people make of it what they will. So I don't know. I'm not really a big UFO guy, but I guess we got to deal with what's going on in the world and what people are talking about, and provide the Christian perspective and Christian answer. So thank you, and God bless you.